My name's Stuart Candlish. I'm a fisheries biologist with Ayrshire Trust, and what we're going to do through this video is have a look at some of the most common issues that we come across on our watercourses, and we're going to use a few case study projects we've recently completed to have a look at how we've overcome those difficulties. So from our perspective, one of the quickest and easiest ways of improving riparian margins, the water quality, all of that comes with this thing here. It's a fence. It's a bit of a silver bullet as far as we're concerned, really. But the problem being it's an expensive bullet. Just by excluding these guys from the water margin here, we deal with all sorts of problems. We cut the nutrient input coming from the sort of fecal matter from the animals. We cut the bank erosion and the siltation and the sediment that comes off the back of that. And very quickly our riverbanks start to heal themselves, and we get grasses and trees starting to recolonise these open spaces. You guys are far better on that side of the fence than you are on this one. However, once this fence is in place, it does rather leave us in with an issue of how do we water these animals. For years prior, they've had access to the burn, free drinking water, low maintenance or no maintenance at all, and that's a very attractive proposition as far as the landowner is concerned. So we had to come up with a few creative solutions to this one. Our first go-to was we installed a gravity-fed water system running 600 or so metres of alkafine pipe from one end of the burn all the way down to the watering trough down the far end. And that's worked very well. It's been reliable. It's just continued to trickle away in the background, constantly keeping the two tanks in this system topped up. But the landowner wasn't the most convinced that that would be a solution that would just continue to work in the background. So what we've also now done is put in a system where we're using bilge pumps and a solar panel system to keep the troughs topped up whenever these guys have a good go at the drinking water. So this solar system we've put in place here is in fact just a cheaper way of creating what you can go and buy off the shelf, and it's a system that costs probably about £400 to put in place, whereas an alternative off the shelf spec would have cost us nigh on £1,000, and it was money that we didn't have in the project to do that. So this was our solution, and solution that's been very successful. It's fairly easily put together, it's quick, the maintenance aspect's very low as well, and it's been so successful in fact we're now starting to roll out across other projects where we've got similar issues. Unfortunately, this thing here, fencing, is quite an expensive endeavour these days. We're looking at, in all actuality, £12 to £14 a metre. It doesn't matter how you cut it, that's expensive. But the difference between this side of the fence and this one here, I think is pretty obvious. We've got lots of native grasses, and we've got our trees are protected over here that we've planted. But on this side, you can see we've got bare earth, and okay, we've got some grasses coming, but it's been pretty hammered by these guys, and that's fine. There's a place for that over there. What we don't need is that on the riverbank top here. Can be hugely detrimental with the amount of silt and sediment released into the burn. One of the other main reasons we're always trying to get fencing in place as well is to protect the trees that we plant as part of these projects, and the two tend to go hand in hand for us. One of our big concerns is rising water temperatures across the country, and there's one way of alleviating that, and that is to plant more trees and to retain the trees that we currently have. One way to do that is to put up a fence. Again, not cheap, but the trees that we're planting aren't cheap. It's costing us around about £5.50 per tree guarded and staked in the ground. So that represents a hell of an investment from our side as well. And there's no point in planting these things if all they're going to do is get knocked over and then browsed by cattle and sheep. So it's a crucial aspect of all our projects at the moment is fencing. Silt and sediment act to bind your nice loose substrates up, your cobbles, your pebbles, your boulders, that act as habitat for fish. It's one, it's hiding places. Two, it's your invertebrate habitat, and without good levels of invertebrates supporting the river system, you're not going to have very good fish populations. Without good fish populations, you're not going to have good bird life around your rivers, so you're not going to have good mammalian life around your rivers. So having a good water quality and good in-stream habitat is pretty fundamental to the whole thing operating well. And it's only by excluding livestock, it's only by having good diverse flora that the whole thing starts to thrive, and that all starts when you exclude livestock and you fence livestock out. Without loose mobile substrates, salmon and trout spawning is very impacted. What salmon and trout needs is sort of loose, clean, mobile substrates, stuff that they can excavate a bed with their tail, and if that stuff's all bound together by silt and sand and mud, it makes that process that much more difficult for the fish to go through. And so your resulting progeny from that spawning effort is severely hampered, might not survive through the egg stage to hatching out. And when you've got a species, Atlantic salmon, which has recently been designated as an endangered species and is very much more under threat than ever it has been before, everything we can do in the freshwater environment, even these small burns, will have an impact on what leaves our rivers and goes out to sea. After that, it's sort of out with our remit and it's out with our influence, but our remit, our influence is here, and that's why we fight so hard to get money to carry out these projects and to get them on the ground. Because trees are such a vital part of everything that we do, we've taken upon ourselves to develop what's a small but growing tree nursery at our office, where we're taking local provenance seeds from known sources, propagating those on and rearing them to a level where they can get planted out onto the riverbanks. And so we know that those trees, if we've taken an oak tree from the Girvan, that tree then going back out into the Girvan, it's adapted, it's suited to that environment. And that mitigates the problems that you get with bringing trees in from the continent and large-scale nurseries where stuff like ash dieback then become a problem. That's the type of thing we're trying to mitigate at the moment. Rivers are naturally mobile, they're not always going to stay in the same place, and as much as man would like them to remain in the same place, it's just not the way things work. But rivers are far less inclined to move when you've got a good root matrix in the banks, and that's one of the other problems that we find then when you've got a high level of livestock grazing pressure on the riverbanks, is that there's no roots there, there's no grasses there, and the whole river becomes that much more susceptible to movement. And you know, it's just hardly a burn that hasn't been altered or straightened at some point in the past. What we're going to do now is go back a year hence and have a look at some of the work we were doing on the water of Girvan.
Here we are at the greening the banks of the water of Girvan. We just completed some green engineering work in the last week, and we're back here today to seed it up before we put any coya down, just to protect it for over winter. The project is supported by Nature Restoration Fund, which is through Nature Scot, the local district salmon fishery board, and also supported by the landowner. This site has suffered from years of significant bank erosion due to historic interventions such as levees upstream, which has meant that the erosion here is beyond the natural sort of level of erosion that you would expect in a river system, which means that massive amounts of soil and silt are being washed into the river every year, which has an impact downstream on invertebrate populations and salmon and trout spawning habitat in particular. So it's really important that we intervene using natural means, using local materials, locally sourced, and create a sort of more natural bank that can function as a natural bank in a river system. This here is a technique using willow mattress laid on top of each other. It's a new technique to me. I've not used this before, but it's nice to see the process in which we lay different species of willow on top of each other and then bury it with some soil and then repeat the process all the way along the length of the bank. And then it's held in, again using willow stakes of different species and pinned in using wire, with the end result being a living bank in a couple of years. And you shouldn't be able to tell that we've even had a hand in this, hopefully. The reason we're here and doing this work is because this riverbank was not a nice natural slope as it is elsewhere in the system. It got to the point where the bank erosion had led to a sheer vertical riverbank, which meant that every time there was high water coming in, the water was eroding away and it was just collapsing away into the water, which obviously isn't great because that's putting out a massive amount of soil and silt into the water that shouldn't naturally be there. One of the last components of this work that we'll be doing is putting down a sort of coya membrane. So that's essentially a cover on top that's biodegradable. We'll be using biodegradable stakes as well. And it's just a nice cover that will protect the bank while the willow and the trees are establishing. But the reason we haven't put it down yet is, first of all, we want to get the seed down, get that growing, but also because it's October, it's really wet in the fields and we haven't been able to get our trailer in, and it's quite hiked to try and bring in 4 or 5 rolls of coir membrane, which is quite large and heavy.
So our expectation for this site is that very quickly we'll get the grass seed established. Despite the fact we're in early October, it's incredibly mild for the time of year. So our grass, our wildflower seed mix here and the ryegrass should establish fairly quickly. Okay, so what we were using was big willow stakes like this. You can see we've got a variety of different species here. These are a few that are left over, which we'll use to pin in brash bundles in key spots along this bank face, just to give an extra layer of protection. It's big pieces of willow like this, but 3 or 4 times or 3 times as tall as this, because about 3 feet, that are pinning all this banking together and holding the wire. So you can imagine that driven all the way down into the bank. This will all root. This plant will put out roots all through the length of it, and that working its way out into a riverbank, which is pretty much denuded of anything vegetative at the moment, is going to give you a really solid bank in years to come. You get that root matrix in there that's going to bind and hold all the soil together and make it really resilient long term to erosion.
So this is still part of the project, this area here. You can see that this area of the bank is starting to get some poaching, livestock poaching, in particular sheep are able to access this. And basically by walking along and trying to eat parts of the bank here, they're cutting away and forming a sort of cliff-like bank. And the sections here, they're just going to, again, with time, fall away and just exacerbate this whole issue. We're going to use some willow and some brash and just be a wee bit more sympathetic in this area because it's relatively stable. And the key thing will be getting some roots and trees into it and also excluding the livestock as well. That'll be a key thing we need to do to really improve this section of the bank.
One of the other projects we've recently completed as well, 2022 recent, was a wellwood project where we took on some huge sections of green engineering. A section of riverbank severely impacted with morphological alterations in the past, we're talking hundreds of years ago here, and in dire need of some stability, some tree planting and some fencing. So here's a little bit of footage of some of the problems, the befores and afters, and how we dealt with those elements. Well, we're in January. This is day 5 of the wellwood project. It's Monday. We've got a new bit of gear.
This post driver, which is a huge help to us, and we're very grateful for that. That was donated by a supporter who we did a wee bit of work for, and in return we were given this machine, so that's fantastic.
It's a Portec. It's a post driver which kind of fencers would use, but taking it and using it for engineering in rivers. We just couldn't get some of these stakes into the riverbank 3 feet or more without it. So this is going to be an invaluable tool for us going forward in this job. We were very grateful to be joined by Alex and Charlotte. They helped us build a massive brash bundles. We then showed them how to install these bundles into a riverbank to protect against erosion. At only 10 years old, Charlotte was grafting just as hard as anybody else was on site, and we greatly appreciate both their help on this day.
How's your Latin? Are you any good at Latin? No, not at all. Right, okay, so any species in the world, right, whether it's an animal or a plant, fine, this is native to here. This is like grown here.
Guess who has to walk? I'll show you just how far that is.
Day 6 or day 7. So mate, what day is this we're at? Week 2, day 2.
works that are happening tomorrow. We've got to remove this fence. That's the old fence line, so you can see how far the river's cutting behind that. So we've just got to cut this out, remove it, and that'll be a taken off site.
Right.
You can see that, but we're getting our steps in. That's the end of this day, whatever day this might be. Machine is somewhere in the background. Where's the machine? Machine is just there, I think. So I'll start digging tomorrow, excavating, regrading these banks back to a more gentle slope, less prone to erosion. I'll just be Stuart on site tomorrow. The rest of us are doing a training course on green engineering and sort of geomorphology, I think it's going to be. So we've got a rest day. Stuart's going to be back at it first thing in the morning, but that's okay. Here's the box. And we'll see you on Thursday. We're on week 2, day 4. Week 2, day 4. We've got machine on site again today. He's doing a great job getting the banks reprofiled down to shallower angle. We've made very good progress this over the last 2 days. Stuart was here yesterday by himself with the machine guy. So see how we progress as the day goes on. A crucial element of this job has been having lots of willow stakes and poles close to hand with spikes on them. This allows them to be easily driven into the riverbed, and given time these should root, making them incredibly resistant to being washed out. Making use of large woody material has been important to this job, and whilst we're big advocates for brushwood fascines, using large material like this makes our job a lot easier. We can progress work much more quickly and probably end up with a more secure and robust revetment.
Right, what we've done in this bank here is laid a brash mattress. We've got spruce logs at the front, staked in, brash laid on the bank over some soil, more soil over the brash, another layer of brash in there facing different directions, interlaced, driven stakes through it, and then wire over it. And we're about to drive these stakes down into the ground now, and that'll tighten this wire up, and that'll help hold them tight together. Brilliant and stronger structure, really.
This is day 5, week 2, day 5. Made a major mistake this morning. Put too heavy a type of thermal on, and I'm dying of heat today. It's been a fairly hectic morning this morning. You see the machines working away in the background. He's off hire at the end of the day, so I'm making the most of them, getting some large woody debris in the toe of this bank, get it protected before the weekend. The coir membrane, or coir matting in between a biodegradable membrane. This will help anchor and protect the banking for the first few years, in which case this will just then become part of the banking. We'll plant willow through it as well. That will shore it up. This should just give us the opportunity now to feel a little bit safer should there be some rain and some higher water. Bank's less prone to being eroded when it's when this is on it. This is just staked into place with potato starch pegs, which again biodegradable. In a few years' time, once this whole thing's become living and rooted together, will just degrade and just disappear. That's an end to week 2. We've done masses. Small sub-catchment in the River Doon here. For all it's not a burn of any real size, I mean it's jumpable across on a day like today. This is a burn that still produces quite good numbers of salmon, good relative to its size anyway. There aren't loads of these spawning burns on the Doon system, so any burn that does produce salmon, it really needs to be maximised especially in light of salmon being classified as an endangered species. Everything we can do in the freshwater environment will help. A lot of the problems are still out at sea, and we recognise that, but there's still a lot of problems that we can have an impact on. I think you'll agree that now this is all fenced off, this is starting to look a fantastic little habitat, and it's only been 6 months since the cattle have been excluded, so very excited to see what it's going to look like in another 5 years' time. Prior to this tank going in place, one of the other things we did was have the farmer get a ton of stone, or a couple of ton of stone delivered here, to make a solid foundation before this tank went in place, and that means the whole thing's not going to end up as heavily poached, and it's made a big difference. I hope one of the takeaways from this video is that we're very proactive and we're very willing to help anyone who's got any issues. You just need to get in touch with us and we'll do our very best to either maybe try and find the funding, make suggestions, come up with design solutions for problems. It's all part of our remit as we see it anyway. And we've got a lot of experience. We've been on the go now for 24 years and we've done some fantastic projects. We've made a big difference across a lot of catchments. But there's more we can do still. But we also need willing people to work with. And if that's you, please get in touch with us.